The night everything started, I was thinking about rent. $640 short, due in 4 days. And I remember doing the math out loud in my car at a red light, like saying it might make the numbers smaller. I drove for a looper, had for 14 months, ever since the hotel front desk job dried up along with half the hospitality jobs in the county. Nobody warns you that gig work turns you into an accountant of minutes. Every red light is a cost. Every bad tip is a subtraction. I'd gotten good at not feeling anything about it, which is its own kind of survival skill. The emotional equivalent of calluses. My name is Dani Reyes. I was 29 years old, driving a 10-year-old Corolla with 161,000 miles on it. And that night, the app on my dashboard mount chimed with an order that would end up rerouting the rest of my life. Though, obviously, I didn't know that yet. Nobody ever knows that yet. That's the whole cruelty of beginnings. They don't announce themselves. The order was for 144 Halden Court. 2 bags, groceries mostly, canned goods and bottled water, and a jar of honey. Paid for, tip already included. $12. Which for an exurb delivery that far out was low but not insulting. I tapped accept without really looking at the address. The way you don't really look at a hallway you've walked down 400 times. Except I hadn't walked down this one. I'd never delivered to Halden Court before. And if I'd actually looked, actually let my eyes catch on the map thumbnail before I swiped, I might have noticed that the pin was sitting in the middle of a patch of green with no roads drawn through it. I noticed about 6 minutes into the drive, when my GPS voice went quiet in a way GPS voices don't usually go quiet, and the little blue arrow representing my car sat frozen on a road that, according to the map, ended a 1/4 mile ahead of me in nothing. Grass, undeveloped land, grayish-green in satellite view, the kind of blank rectangle you see on the edges of maps where a subdivision got planned and never finished. I called my roommate. Priya picked up on the second ring, because Priya always picks up on the second ring. It's one of the small, permanent facts about her, like how she puts too much cardamom in everything and cries at commercials for insurance companies. "Tell me you're not still working," she said. "It's almost 11. I'm on a delivery. My GPS just had a stroke." That's not a euphemism I've heard before. I'm serious, Pry. The road on the map just stops. Like the app thinks this street doesn't exist. Then it doesn't exist. Turn around. There's a car ahead of me on the actual street, though. Actual pavement. Actual mailbox with a flag up. I could hear myself getting that clipped, flattened tone I get when something doesn't fit, and I'm trying to force it to fit anyway, because the alternative is admitting I don't understand what I'm looking at. The map's wrong, that's all. Maps are wrong all the time out here. Priya went quiet in the particular way she goes quiet when she's decided not to argue with me, because arguing with me when I've made a decision is like arguing with a closed door. "Text me when you're back," she said. "I mean it. 11:40 or I'm calling." I said I would. I did not think, even once, to ask myself why a satellite photograph taken from hundreds of miles up, updated by machines with no opinion about anything, would show an empty field where I was, at that exact moment, driving a functioning car down a paved road with working streetlights. The lights, now that I think back on it, were the second thing wrong. They were sodium orange, old style, the kind most counties phased out years ago for LED. They buzzed instead of hummed. And they were spaced wrong, too far apart, so that between each pool of orange light, there was a long stretch of true dark. Darker than it should have been for a place with actual houses on it. I found 144 Halden Court at the end of a cul-de-sac that the app's map still, as far as I could tell, glancing down at the dashboard, did not believe existed. My blue arrow was still frozen on empty grass. But my actual headlights were washing over an actual driveway, an actual porch light left on for me, an actual house. It was a nice house. That's what struck me most, standing there with 2 grocery bags cutting into my fingers. Not a shack, not some abandoned thing reclaimed by weeds, a clean 2-story colonial with vinyl siding the color of wet sand. A wreath on the door that was slightly too cheerful for the month. And a welcome mat that said, "Bless this mess" in cursive, worn down at the corners from what looked like years of feet. I rang the bell, waited, rang it again. The door opened before the second chime finished. The man who answered was maybe 60, thin in the way that could be either fitness or illness, wearing a cardigan buttoned wrong by 1 hole so the whole thing hung slightly crooked on him. He had kind eyes. I want to say that first because it's true, and because it matters for what came after. He did not look wrong. Not at first. Not in any way you could point to. "You're later than usual," he said. I laughed, the automatic customer service laugh, the one you learn to produce even when you have no idea what the joke is. "First time out here, actually. Sorry, the GPS was having a moment." Something crossed his face. Not confusion, recognition maybe, or its opposite, the specific blankness of someone recalculating. "First time," he repeated, like he was trying the words out to see if they fit in his mouth. "Dani," I said, holding up the bags. 2 bags, the honey's on top so it doesn't get crushed. "Warren," he said, and took the bags from me, and our hands touched for maybe half a second around the plastic handles, his skin dry and cool in a way that October nights don't usually explain. That's when I saw it. Just past his shoulder, through the gap of the open door, down the hallway that should have led to a kitchen or a staircase. There was a shape at the far end, low to the ground, unmoving, in the dark where the hallway light didn't reach. I want to be precise about what I actually saw, because everything after this made me doubt my own memory of it constantly, replaying it, sanding down the edges until I wasn't sure what was real, and what my mind built afterward to make sense of things. What I saw was a shape the approximate size and posture of a person, folded at an angle a sitting person doesn't fold at, head tilted so far to one side that if it had been a doll, I'd have said the neck joint was broken. It did not move. I watched it for maybe 2 full seconds, the 2 longest seconds of that entire night up to that point. And it did not move. And then Warren shifted his body slightly to block my sight line. Not aggressively, almost gently. The way you'd step in front of a mess you hadn't cleaned up yet. "My wife," he said. "She doesn't sleep well. Down there in the den, easier on her back than the bed these days." It was a reasonable sentence. It explained the shape. It gave the wrongness a shape of its own sick woman. Bad back, den converted to a sick room. I have told myself 100 times since that I should have pushed past him. Should have walked down that hallway and looked. Should have done anything except what I actually did, which was nod, say I hoped she felt better soon, and back off the porch into the orange buzzing dark. "Thank you for coming all this way," Warren said, and there was something in how he said it, a weight on the word way that didn't belong there, that followed me back to my car like a hand on the back of my neck. I didn't run. I want that on record too, because it would be a better story if I had. If some animal instinct had screamed at me, and I'd sprinted for the Corolla with my heart in my throat. Instead, I walked at a completely normal pace, got in, and sat for a second with my hands on the wheel before I let myself exhale. The dashboard chimed. "Delivery complete. $12 tip received. Rate your experience." I gave it 5 stars. I don't know why. Habit maybe, or the specific cowardice of wanting the interaction to be officially, administratively over. I checked the map on my way out of the cul-de-sac. The blue arrow representing my car was, according to the app, still sitting frozen on an empty green field half a mile away from where my actual headlights were carving a tunnel through actual dark toward an actual highway on-ramp. Two versions of the same 10 minutes, existing on top of each other, refusing to agree. I texted Priya at 11:38. Home soon. Weird night. Tell you later. She sent back a single question mark, then a string of them. Then, before I could type anything else, a text that just said, Dani, your location's not updating on Find My Friends. It says you're in a field. I looked at that message for a long time before I put the car in drive. Looper's support chat opened with a little cartoon icon of a headset and the words, Hi, I'm Julian. How can I help you tonight? In a font specifically engineered, I think, to make you feel like you're bothering a machine that is nonetheless required by policy to pretend to care. I typed, I need to report an address discrepancy. 144 Halden Court doesn't show up correctly on the map system. It shows an empty field, but the house is definitely there. There was a pause. The 3 dots that mean a person, or something pretending to be a person, is typing. Julian, I understand your concern, Dani. I've checked our records, and I don't see an active delivery zone matching that address. Can you confirm the order number? I sent the order number, Julian. I'm showing that order as completed successfully at 11:31 p.m. There's no address on file matching 144 Halden Court in our current mapping database for your zone. I want to be honest about what I felt reading that, because it wasn't fear. Not yet. It was the specific low-grade insult of being told by a corporate chat window that something I had personally, physically experienced with my own hands had not happened according to their system. I've delivered pizzas to houses that didn't have working doorbells, to apartments where the buzzer system was 30 years dead, to a guy once who paid in a rolled coin wrapper like it was 1975. I know what a broken address system feels like. This wasn't that. This was a house standing exactly where a map insisted, with data-backed confidence, that no house could be. I typed, the order completed because I physically drove there and handed a man named Warren 2 bags of groceries. The house exists. I don't know why your map doesn't show it, but it's there. Julian, I appreciate you flagging this. I'll escalate to our mapping team. In the meantime, is there anything else I can help you with tonight? That was it. No follow-up. No acknowledgement that a driver reporting a phantom address that nonetheless yielded a completed delivery and a 5-star rating and $12 real might be worth more than a canned escalation line. I closed the chat and sat in my driveway with the engine still running, because some part of me didn't want to go inside yet. Didn't want to have to explain to Priya what had happened, when I still didn't have a version of it that made sense out loud. I went in anyway. Priya was on the couch with her laptop and a mug of something that had gone cold enough to have a skin on it. And she looked up at me with an expression I recognized because I'd seen it on her before. Back when her mother was sick, the specific alertness of someone who has decided, in advance, to take whatever you say seriously. Tell me, she said. I told her. The frozen GPS, the orange lights, the wreath, the wrongly buttoned cardigan, the shape in the hallway that didn't move, the explanation about a wife with a bad back that fit a little too well, like a lid designed for a different jar. I told her about Julian and the empty field, and the escalation that would go nowhere. Priya didn't tell me I was imagining it. That's the thing about Priya. And it's why I've kept her as a roommate through 3 apartments and one truly disastrous ex-boyfriend of hers that I will not get into. She doesn't do the thing people do where they try to make your fear smaller so they don't have to hold it with you. She sat with it. "Don't take that order again," she said finally. "If it comes up again, just don't." It won't come up again. It was a one-time glitch. "Dani." "What?" "You don't actually believe that. I can hear it in your voice. You believe it, and you're saying the opposite because saying the true thing means admitting something's wrong. And you hate admitting things are wrong before you've got a plan for them." She wasn't wrong. She is very rarely wrong about me, which is either the best or worst thing about living with your childhood best friend, depending on the week. I told her I was tired, which was true, and went to bed, and lay there running the 2 seconds of that shape in the hallway over and over, sanding it smoother each time until it was almost something I could tell myself I'd imagined. I fell asleep around 2. At 2:53 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand with the specific double chime Looper uses for a new order alert. I didn't check it until morning. When I did, my stomach dropped in a way I still, all this time later, feel an echo of when certain notification sounds play near me. New delivery available. 144 Halden Court. Accept within 60 seconds. The offer had already expired by the time I looked at it. 60 seconds is nothing. Most drivers miss half their notifications, but there was a second line under it. Small, gray, easy to miss. Previously completed by you. Reassigned. For 3 days, nothing happened. And I want to be honest that this was almost worse than if something had. Fear needs an object. Without one, it just curdles into a low static hum that sits under everything, under grocery shopping, under a shift at the wheel, under the particular exhaustion of pretending to be a normal person doing a normal job. I kept my phone face down more than I used to. I found myself checking the map thumbnail before accepting any order, scanning for a blank green rectangle where a street should be, the way some people check under a bed they haven't checked under since childhood but can't quite stop doing. On the 4th night, it came back. New delivery available. 118 Halden Court. $14.50 including tip. Different number. Same street name. My hands actually shook putting the car in park at the gas station where I was idling. The notification glowing up at me like something that had learned in 4 days to change its face slightly so I wouldn't recognize it as fast. I declined it. There's a button for that, small and gray, tucked below the bright green accept button that the app clearly wants you to hit. And I hit the gray one so hard, I nearly cracked the screen protector. Within 90 seconds, a different notification replaced it. Not another order. A message, formatted in the same clean sans serif font Looper uses for account alerts, the kind that usually tell you about tax documents or a promotion for double pay on holidays. Your decline rate has increased. Excessive declines may affect your account standing and eligibility for priority routing. 3 declines remaining before 30-day review period. I sat in that gas station lot doing math I hated doing. I declined exactly 1 order in 14 months before that night, a house with 2 loose pit bulls in the yard and no fence, which felt like a reasonable exception, even to an algorithm. Now I was 3 declines away from a review that could mean deactivation. And deactivation meant no income for however long an appeal took. And no income meant the $640 I already didn't have would multiply into something I genuinely could not survive. This is the shape moral dilemmas actually take in real life for people like me. Not a dramatic choice between 2 noble things, a gray button and a green button, and a company that has quietly arranged the incentives so that the responsible thing and the survivable thing point in opposite directions. I called Marcus. Marcus Alden had been driving for Looper almost as long as I had, and we developed the kind of friendship gig work manufactures out of shared boredom and shared exhaustion, texting each other bad tippers' addresses as a warning system, splitting a thermos of coffee at 2 a.m. in a parking lot we'd claimed as neutral territory. He answered with his usual tone, flat and dry, like everything mildly amused him and nothing surprised him. If you're calling to complain about surge pricing again, I already know. I saw it too. Have you gotten a weird order lately? Somewhere out past East Ridge? Halden Glen, the old development? A pause. Longer than I liked. Why? Just answer, Marcus. I got sent to a place 2 weeks ago called Corin Hollow. Never heard of it. Not on any map I could find. No listing. Nothing. GPS took me down this access road that wasn't paved, just packed dirt. And there was a house at the end of it that had no business having power, because the whole area is supposed to be undeveloped county land. Guy paid cash on delivery, which nobody does anymore. Tipped me $40. Didn't say 2 words to me the whole time. He exhaled. And I heard the specific rasp of him lighting a cigarette he'd told me a dozen times he was quitting. I didn't think about it again until you just said Halden Glen in that voice. What voice? The voice you're using right now, like you already know I'm going to say yes. I told him everything. The frozen GPS, Warren, the shape in the hallway, the reassignment, the decline threat ticking down like a countdown clock built into my livelihood. He listened without interrupting, which for Marcus was its own kind of alarm bell. Because Marcus interrupts everyone, out of habit, out of nerves, out of some deep need to fill silence before it can settle into something serious. Corin Hollow, he said finally. I looked it up after. County records, historical society page, everything. There was a subdivision plan there in 2007. 60-some lots. The developer went under in the crash before they finished more than a handful of houses. Bank foreclosed. And then this is the part that got me the county filed to have the whole plat deregistered. Wiped it off the tax maps entirely, like it never got approved in the first place. Why would they do that? No idea. But Dani, if your Halden Glen thing and my Corin Hollow thing are the same kind of place, that's not one glitch. That's 2 different ghost developments, 2 different drivers. Both of us getting routed to houses that are standing on land that officially doesn't have houses on it. I spent my day off doing something I hadn't done since a college research paper, actual archival digging. 3 browser tabs deep into county records, historical aerial photography, and a local preservation society's poorly designed but lovingly maintained website that had, buried 4 pages deep, a PDF of a 2008 zoning board meeting transcript. Halden Glen Estates, approved 2005, groundbreaking 2006, 11 houses completed out of a planned 90 before the developer, a company called Brenmark Residential, folded in the collapse. The transcript included a line from a county official that I read 3 times. Given the environmental remediation flag on parcel 14, the board recommends full deregistration of the plat rather than partial completion. Environmental remediation flag. I didn't know what that meant exactly, but I knew what it sounded like. And it sounded like a euphemism for something buried that somebody didn't want to pay to properly dig up and deal with. I texted Marcus a screenshot. He called back within a minute instead of texting, which from Marcus meant he was rattled. Parcel 14, he said. You said the address was 144 Halden Court. What if the house numbers on that street map back to parcel numbers from the original plat? 14, 44, whatever internal numbering the county used before it got wiped. What if the actual houses that got built, the 11 that got finished before everything went under, are sitting directly on top of whatever that remediation flag was about? That's a lot of what if. You got a better theory for a house that exists in real life and doesn't exist on a satellite photo? I didn't. That was the problem. Every rational explanation I tried to build collapsed under its own weight the second I pictured Warren's dry, cool hand around the grocery bag handle. The shape in the hallway folded at an angle no comfortable person folds at. "There's something else," Marcus said. And his voice dropped the dry humor entirely, which scared me more than anything he'd said so far. I looked up the driver who had the Core and Hollow route before me. Looper doesn't publish that, obviously, but there's a driver forum, regional subreddit, whatever. And there's a guy who posted 8 months ago about a delivery to an address that wasn't on any map out past the old Brenmark development sites. Detailed post. Same kind of thing. Frozen GPS, house that shouldn't exist. Guy who answered the door felt wrong somehow, though he couldn't say why. What happened to him? That's the thing. That post is the last thing he ever posted. Account's been inactive since. I messaged him, no response. I checked his Looper driver review page. You can see if an account's still active from the customer side. There's a little green dot. His dot's gray. Deactivated or gone. I sat with that for a long moment. The specific chill of realizing that whatever this was, it had a history longer than 4 days. Longer than me and Marcus. A slow rotation of drivers cycling through an address that apparently selected who got sent there next. The way a tide selects what washes up on a particular stretch of shore. "I think," I said slowly, "we're not the first people this has happened to. And I don't think we'll be the last either, unless somebody figures out what's actually going on out there." "You're not thinking of going back?" I didn't answer right away, and that silence told him everything he needed to know. Because Marcus said my name again. Sharper this time, the way you say someone's name when you already know the answer and you're trying to make them say it out loud, so it becomes real and arguable. "Dani. I need to know what's under that house," I said. "Not tonight, not alone, but I need to know." That night's shift felt different in a way I couldn't fully name until I was 3 deliveries in. Ordinary deliveries, a pizza run to a duplex, a pharmacy pickup for an elderly woman who tipped in quarters she counted out loud on her porch, a bag of takeout to a college apartment complex called Birchwood Commons, where I delivered probably 200 times over the past year. Nothing about any of it should have registered as strange. But at Birchwood, the woman who answered 4CA regular, a nursing student named Faith, who always tipped well and always had the same tired, friendly hello, didn't say hello. She opened the door, took the bag without a word, and stood there a beat too long, looking at me, or past me, her eyes doing something I only recognized because I'd seen a version of it 4 nights earlier, through a gap in a doorway I never should have looked it through. Not blank exactly, delayed. Like her face was running on a half-second lag from whatever her brain was doing. "You good, Faith?" I asked, because that's what you say. That's the script for a moment like that. The polite check-in that doesn't actually commit you to anything. "Long week," she said. And the words came out slightly wrong-paced. Gaps in places gaps don't usually go. And then she smiled. And the smile arrived so late after the words that for a second I felt the specific vertigo of watching someone perform being fine slightly out of sync with actually being fine. I told myself it was exhaustion. Nursing students don't sleep. I've delivered to enough of them to know the particular hollow-eyed look that program produces in people by midterms. I told myself that so thoroughly, so deliberately, that I almost believed it by the time I got back in the car. Almost. Because 2 deliveries later, at a house I'd also been to dozens of times, a man named Grant, who always had his dog barking somewhere behind him, and always joked about how the dog thought every delivery was for him that night, no barking. Grant answered the door too fast, like he'd been standing right behind it waiting, and didn't joke about the dog at all. And when I glanced past him, Out of a reflex I didn't fully control, into the front hallway. I didn't see a dog anywhere, not lying down, not underfoot, nowhere. Hey, where's, I fumbled for the name, annoyed at myself for not remembering it. Your dog tonight. Grant looked at me. There was that same lag. A half second where his face hadn't caught up to whatever question had just landed on it. Sleeping, he said finally. And the word came out flat, wrong textured, like a word chosen from a list rather than felt. I did not go looking for the dog. I want to be honest that I did not push past him, did not investigate, did not do anything except take the tip, say goodnight in a voice I kept admirably steady, and walk back to my car at a pace just slightly faster than casual. Both Faith and Grant lived in neighborhoods on my regular Tuesday-Thursday route. Both were people I'd delivered to the same week I'd made the run out to Halden Court. I didn't have proof of anything. Nothing I could have said out loud to Julian's chat window or to a cop or to anyone that wouldn't have sounded like the kind of thing people say right before someone suggests they take some time off. But sitting in my car outside Grant's house, engine idling, hands not quite steady on the wheel, I felt something shift into place that I couldn't unfeel afterward, a pattern with edges, even if I couldn't yet see the whole shape of it. My phone buzzed. Not a text from Marcus or Priya. The double chime, new delivery available, 144 Halden Court, accept within 60 seconds. I stared at it until the offer expired on its own, the green button fading to gray, the countdown ticking silently down to 0 without my finger ever touching it. And even as it expired, even as I told myself I'd won something by simply outlasting the clock, I understood with a cold, settling certainty that it would come back again. It always came back. The only question left was what it would look like the next time, and how much closer to the rest of my life it would have crept by then. I went back on a Saturday afternoon. Sunlight flat and ordinary across the highway. Marcus in the passenger seat with a flashlight, a crowbar he swore he was bringing, just in case the doors stuck. And clearly meant as something else entirely. And a nervous energy he covered with a stream of commentary about a podcast neither of us was actually listening to. Daylight changes things. That's worth saying plainly, because horror stories like to pretend darkness is the only register fear comes in. But there's a specific clean-edged wrongness to seeing a haunted place under a blue sky, with birds going about their unbothered business in the trees nearby. The GPS did the same thing it had done before Arrow, frozen on a green rectangle. Voice guidance dying into silence a quarter-mile out. But this time, I kept driving on memory alone, counting the turns I'd made 4 days earlier by feel. What we found at the end of the road was not a cul-de-sac with a nice colonial and a cheerful wreath. It was ruins. Overgrown foundations, maybe 6 or 7 of them, poking up out of waist-high grass like broken teeth. Rebar rusted into orange lace. One chimney standing alone with no house left around it at all. A monument to nothing. No orange sodium streetlights. No pavement past a certain point, just the packed dirt Marcus had described from his own trip out to Corin Hollow, the county having apparently torn the road up, along with everything else, when they deregistered the plat. "This is it," Marcus said, and his voice had lost every trace of its usual dryness. "This is Halden Glen. It's been like this for years." We walked the foundations in silence for a while. That specific silence of 2 people independently trying to reconcile 2 versions of the same place and failing. I found what I was fairly sure had been the footprint of Warren's house. The dimensions were close. The orientation on the lot roughly right, but there was no house there. Just a foundation slab, cracked, grass growing up through it in patient green fingers. and near the back corner, half collapsed into the earth, a rusted metal hatch. It was the kind of hatch you see over storm shelters or old bunkers maybe 3 feet across, hinged, with a wheel lock mechanism seized entirely with rust. Stenciled on it, faded almost past legibility, were letters that took the two of us a long minute of squinting to piece together. Brenmark Residential Remediation. Access authorized personnel only. Remediation access, Marcus repeated. So whatever that zoning transcript flagged, it's under here. Not somewhere else on the property. Right here, under what would have been Warren's house. Neither of us tried to open the hatch. I want to be clear about that, because there's a version of this story where the brave, foolish thing happens, where we force the wheel lock, climb down into the dark with a flashlight and a crowbar, and the horror properly begins underground in some buried facility. That is not what happened. We stood over that hatch for maybe 90 seconds, and something about the stillness of the air around it, no birds nearby, I noticed belatedly. No birds at all in this particular corner of an otherwise ordinary overgrown field, made both of us step back at almost the same moment without discussing it, like our bodies had independently voted against curiosity. I don't think we go down there, Marcus said. No, I agreed. But I think whatever's down there isn't staying down there anymore. We found something else before we left, a little further along the foundation line, half buried in dirt and old leaves. A metal mailbox post toppled, the box itself rusted through in patches, but the numbers on its side still readable if you brush the dirt away with your fingers. 144. There was no house standing on that foundation. There hadn't been, from what I could tell, in a very long time. And yet 4 nights earlier, I had rung a doorbell on a porch that existed at this exact location, handed 2 bags of groceries to a man named Warren, and driven away with a 5-star rating and $12. We sat in Marcus's truck in a gas station lot afterward, doors locked, both of us quiet for a long stretch before he finally said what I'd been circling around saying myself. You keep going back to the same house. I keep going to a different one that's basically the same situation. There's a pattern in who gets sent where, and it's not random. You think it's choosing us? I think, he said carefully, picking his words the way you pick footing on ice, that whatever's under those hatches has been down there a long time, contained, and something about it is starting to leak. And it's using, I don't know, the delivery system, the road network, whatever, as a way to reach out. And it picks people who are already coming close. Drivers on the exact routes that border the old development lines. It's not choosing us specifically. It's choosing proximity. And then once it's got a driver hooked into the pattern, into the loop, it keeps calling that driver back. Because a driver who's already been once is a driver whose account, whose GPS, whose whole digital footprint has already been quietly rerouted through it once. I thought about the frozen blue arrow on an empty field while my actual body stood on an actual porch. I thought about Priya's text. Your location's not updating. It says you're in a field sign, and felt something horrible click into place. It's not the map that's wrong, I said slowly. It's not glitching. It's telling the truth about something. When I was there, some part of the system, my phone, my account, whatever's tracking me, actually did think I was standing in an empty field, because that's what's really there. The house Warren answered the door of isn't really there in the way regular houses are there. It's something else wearing the shape of a delivery, using the pattern of a normal Tuesday night to get a person to walk up, ring a bell, and make physical contact with whatever's underneath. Contact, Marcus repeated. And I watched him arrive at the same place I had, a half-second behind me, his face going through the same lag I'd seen on Faith's, on Grant's. Except this was just ordinary human dread, not whatever that other thing was. You touched his hand when you handed him the bags. Yeah. And then you went straight to Birchwood and to Grant's. Yeah. He didn't say the rest out loud, and I was grateful for that, because I didn't think either of us could survive hearing it said plainly yet. That whatever passed between Warren's hand and mine in that half-second of contact over plastic grocery bag handles might not have stayed with Warren. That it might have ridden along in whatever way that kind of thing rides, dormant, patient, and gotten off at every stop I made afterward that same night, leaving a little of itself behind at each door, like a coin dropped from a pocket without anyone noticing. I looked up my delivery history that night, matching addresses against the map of my regular route, cross-referencing which stops had come after Halden Court on which nights. There was a pattern, and it was worse than I wanted it to be. Every single house or apartment where I'd later noticed that lag, that half-second delay behind someone's eyes, had received a delivery from me within 4 hours of a Halden Court run. Not every delivery I'd made after Halden Court showed it yet, but every place that had shown it, I'd been to Halden Court first. I went back one more time, alone, against every piece of advice Marcus and Priya both gave me in increasingly urgent tones over a text thread that filled up with more punctuation than words by the end. I told myself it was to confirm something, to get one clean piece of information I could bring back and act on. I think the truer reason was that some part of me needed to see Warren's face again and ask him directly what he was, because I had started to suspect he wasn't simply a man who lived at the edge of something terrible. I suspected he was the terrible thing's oldest, most patient shape. The house was there again when I drove out that night. Lit porch, wreath, cardigan buttoned wrong, all of it exactly as before. As though the ruins Marcus and I had walked through that afternoon existed on a different day entirely, a different layer of the same place that only surfaced under conditions I didn't understand and couldn't reliably predict. You came without an order, Warren said, standing in the doorway. And for the first time, there was something almost like surprise in his voice, a texture of feeling I hadn't heard from him before. I need to ask you something. You can ask. What's under the house, under this exact spot? He looked at me for a long moment, and in that look, I saw the lag again. That same half-second delay I'd seen in Faith, in Grant, except in Warren, it wasn't a flicker. It was the whole rhythm of him, every response arriving just slightly late, as though he were relaying something from very far away and translating it into a language he only half remembered. Something that's been patient for a long time, he said. Longer than the road. Longer than the houses that got built over it and torn down again. It doesn't hate you. I want you to understand that, because I don't think anyone will explain it to you clearly after tonight, and I think you deserve to have heard it clearly at least once. It doesn't hate anyone. It's simply been waiting for enough doors to open. Behind him, down the hallway, in the same spot as before, the shape shifted. Not much. A slow, wet unfolding of a limb that had been bent wrong for longer than any living joint should tolerate. And in the porch light spilling weakly down that hall, I saw, for the first time clearly, that the shape had no wife's face. No soft, familiar features to explain away with a story about a bad back. It had a face the color and texture of something left too long in water. Eyes open and fixed on nothing, mouth slightly parted around a breath that didn't seem to be moving air in either direction. I didn't scream. I want that on the record. Not out of pride, but because I think it matters what I felt wasn't the sharp animal terror of a jump scare. It was something slower and colder, the specific horror of watching your worst private theory get confirmed in perfect, unhurried detail. You should go, Warren said. And for just a moment the lag in his voice cleared entirely, and something like the original man underneath whatever this was looked out at me with what I can only describe, even now, as pity. You've already carried enough of it out of here. More doors than you know. I turned and walked back to my car at a pace I didn't try to control anymore. And I did not look back at the house, because some part of me understood that if I looked back, I would see it changing shape behind me, dissolving back into ruin and grass and a rusted hatch nobody had opened yet. And I did not think I could carry that image alongside everything else I was already going to have to carry. The first real headline came 4 days later, and it wasn't about zombies or infection or anything with a name you'd recognize from a movie poster. It was a local news story about a disturbance at Birchwood Commons. Vague words, the kind local news uses when nobody official has decided yet how alarmed the public is allowed to be. 3 residents hospitalized after what witnesses described as erratic and violent behavior. 1 officer injured. No further details pending investigation. I knew the apartment number before the article said it. 4C Faith. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time after reading that, feeling the specific vertigo of watching an abstraction turn concrete. Up until that point, everything had lived in the register of dread. Strange, unsettling, deeply wrong, but survivable in the way bad dreams are survivable, because you can tell yourself the worst of it is happening just out of frame. A news article with a real apartment number in it moves the worst of it directly into frame. Grant's name appeared 2 days after that, not in a headline, but in a missing persons post shared around a neighborhood Facebook group Priya was in for reasons I'd never fully understood. Something about lost cats and yard sales. Grant Kessler, last seen Tuesday evening. Neighbors report unusual sounds from the residence. Dog also unaccounted for. Please share. The dog I'd never seen. The dog that hadn't barked. I remembered Grant's face, the wrong textured word, sleeping, and understood with a horrible, retroactive clarity what I'd actually been looking at that night. A man already partway transformed, already losing the specific muscle memory of ordinary conversation, performing normalcy with a mouth that no longer quite remembered how normal words were supposed to feel coming out. I called Marcus, and he already knew, because Marcus reads local news the way other people check sports scores compulsively first thing every morning. It's spreading in clusters, he said. No preamble, straight into it, the way people talk when they've stopped having the energy for softening. Birchwood, that block near Grant's place. I checked my own delivery log. I've got 3 addresses now showing the same kind of reports, all clustered around stops I made the same nights I got sent out to Corin Hollow. So it's not just me. It's not just you. It's every driver this thing has ever routed to one of those old development sites. We're not the story, Dani. We're the delivery mechanism. Actual, literal delivery mechanism, which is the worst possible joke a thing like this could be telling, if it's capable of jokes, which I genuinely don't know. I thought about the 60-second countdown timers, the decline penalties, the small gray button buried under a bright green one. The entire architecture of an app designed to make refusal cost more than compliance. I thought about how many drivers, across however many months or years this had actually been going on, had made exactly the choice I'd made that first night swipe except without really looking. 'Cause looking costs time, and time costs money. And money is the thing none of us ever had enough slack in to afford hesitation. We have to tell people, I said. Actually tell them, not the app, not Julian, people. Who's going to believe 2 gig drivers with a story about a haunted subdivision and a hatch we didn't even open? He wasn't being cynical for its own sake. He was naming the actual shape of the problem. The one that would define everything that came after that. The truth we were carrying had no natural audience willing to receive it, because it arrived wearing the same unbelievable shell. Every real warning about something like this always wears right before it becomes obvious. And by the time it becomes obvious, it's generally too late for the warning to matter. Priya got sick on a Thursday. I want to slow down here, because everything up until that point had happened to other people. People I knew a little. People whose names I recognized from apartment buzzers and porch small talk. Priya was different. Priya was the person who picked up on the second ring. Priya was the reason I had somewhere to come home to that still felt like home, instead of just an address. It started small enough that I told myself it was nothing. A headache she mentioned in passing. An unusual quietness over dinner. An answer to a question that came half a beat later than it should have. I noticed the lag before I let myself name it as the lag. The same way you notice a limp on someone you love before you let yourself think the word injury. "You okay?" I asked. The exact same script I'd used on Faith, on Grant, and hating myself for the echo even as the words left my mouth. "Tired," Priya said. And the word arrived correctly paced this time. And I told myself that meant something. That meant I was overreacting. That grief and fear had made me start seeing the pattern everywhere, because it was the only shape my mind currently had available. I traced it back anyway, because some part of me needed to know, even while another part of me was begging not to. 2 nights earlier, I'd come home from a shift that had included, near the end, an unplanned decision I hadn't told anyone about. A Halden Court order had appeared again, and instead of declining it and eating the penalty, exhausted and out of options with my decline count already dangerously high, I had accepted it. I had gone. I had handed Warren a small parcel, something light, an envelope this time rather than groceries, and our hands had brushed again over the exchange. And I had come home afterward and hugged Priya on the couch the way I always did, tired, present, careless with contact, in the specific, unthinking way you're only careless with people you trust completely. I sat on the edge of her bed while she slept fitfully, watching her breathing, and felt something break open in my chest that I don't have a clean word for. Not guilt, exactly, though guilt was in it, and not fear exactly, though fear was in it too. It was closer to the specific horror of understanding that the thing you love most in the world might have been hurt by the exact hands you used to hold it. I didn't tell her that night what I suspected. I told myself I was protecting her from panic, and maybe that was partly true. But the more honest reason was that saying it out loud would have made it real in a way I wasn't ready to survive yet. I called Marcus instead, at 2 a.m, my voice doing something ragged and uneven that I couldn't fully control. "Priya," was all I managed to say. He didn't ask questions. He just said, "I'm coming over." And 20 minutes later, he was in our kitchen making bad coffee neither of us drank. Sitting with me in the specific silence you sit in with someone when there isn't anything useful left to say, only company left to offer. "If this keeps spreading through delivery contact," he said eventually, staring into his mug, "then warning people isn't enough. Warning people what to look for after they're already exposed doesn't save anyone. The only thing that actually stops it is cutting off the source. Whatever's routing drivers out to that address, whatever's deciding who gets sent next, that's the thing that has to stop. Or this just keeps happening to somebody else's Priya, over and over, forever." He was right. And I hated that he was right, because it meant the only real solution left wasn't rescue. It was refusal, aimed backward at the mechanism itself. And I didn't yet know what that would actually require of me. The order came again 2 nights later, while I sat in a hospital waiting room under fluorescent light that made everyone's skin look faintly wrong, waiting for a doctor to tell me something about Priya's test results that I already suspected wouldn't have a name yet, because whatever this was hadn't been written into any medical textbook. New delivery available. 144 Halden Court, except within 60 seconds. I stared at the notification with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks, all the fear and confusion of the past month suddenly compressing down into something almost simple. I understood, sitting there under those lights, that this offer wasn't really an offer. It was a mechanism completing a cycle it had been running for years, through however many drivers had come before me and vanished off driver forums with their little status dots gone gray. Every time someone accepted, something crossed over through a hand on a grocery bag, through an envelope passed at a doorway, and rode outward through the ordinary, trusted architecture of a person doing their job, delivering things to people who let them in, because delivery drivers are supposed to be safe, supposed to be background, supposed to be the last thing you'd ever think twice about. I understood something else too, sitting there. Warren's words came back to me. You've already carried enough of it out of here. More doors than you know. And for the first time, I let myself think all the way through to the end of that sentence. I wasn't just a driver who'd had a bad night. I was the vector, not the villain, not exactly, but the unwitting, exhausted, rent-owing courier who had walked whatever this was directly into Faith's apartment, into Grant's house, into my own home, into the one person on earth I would have done anything to protect. Marcus texted at that exact moment, as though some instinct in him had fired at the same frequency as mine. Don't take it. Whatever it says, don't. I didn't answer him right away. I sat looking at the green accept button glowing steady and patient on my screen. The exact same shade of green it had always been, engineered by people who had never met Warren, or the shape in his hallway, or the hatch in the grass, engineered simply to make saying yes feel slightly easier than saying no, over and over, for however many drivers this address had quietly consumed before it ever reached me. A nurse came out into the waiting room. I looked up, and something in her face told me before she said a single word. The specific practiced gentleness doctors use right before delivering news they've delivered too many times before. News that they've learned no gentleness actually softens. Ms. Reyes, we need to talk about Priya. I stood up, phone still in my hand, the 60-second countdown still ticking silently downward in my palm. And in that moment, the two halves of my life, the ordinary one, where I was simply a frightened roommate waiting for test results, and the impossible one, where I was somehow responsible for carrying a slow catastrophe into the lives of people I loved, collapsed into a single, unbearable present tense that I was going to have to survive, whether I understood it or not. The countdown reached 0 as I walked toward the nurse. The green button faded to gray. The offer expired, unaccepted. And somewhere out past the highway, in a field the satellites swore was empty. I imagine, though, I'll never know for certain that it simply reset itself, patient as ever, and began counting down toward whichever driver's queue it would appear in next. Priya lived. I want to say that plainly and early in this chapter, because I don't think I can carry you through what came next without you knowing that much. First, she lived, though not the way she'd been before, not entirely, and I've made a kind of peace with the distance between those two versions of her that I don't think I'll ever fully close. And that peace is its own long story I'm not going to tell here. What I will tell you is what happened 3 nights after the hospital, the night the loop finally broke, because that's the part that actually answers the question this whole account has been circling. The city had started to feel different by then, In the specific way a place feels different once enough people quietly know something is wrong, even if nobody said it out loud yet on the news. Fewer cars on the roads at night. More houses with every light on at 3 a.m., the particular glow of people too afraid to sleep in the dark. Looper kept running, because gig economies don't stop for apocalypses. They just quietly redistribute the risk downward onto whoever's most desperate to keep working. And that night, I was still working. Because Priya's hospital bills weren't going to pay themselves, and some habits don't break just because the world is ending around their edges. The notification came at 11:14 p.m. while I sat outside a convenience store finishing a delivery. New delivery available, 144 Halden Court, accept within 60 seconds. I didn't decline it, and I didn't accept it either. I sat with the countdown running, watching the seconds tick down. And for the first time, I understood what I actually needed to do. And it wasn't dramatic, and it wasn't the kind of decision that gets a soundtrack. It was smaller than that, and stranger. And it required me to stop treating the app as a neutral tool and start treating it as what it actually was. The specific load-bearing hinge this entire catastrophe had been swinging on from the very beginning. I opened my account settings. Deactivate account. Buried 3 menus deep. Surrounded by discouraging language about lost earnings history and forfeited bonuses. Exactly the kind of friction designed to make quitting feel more costly than staying. I read every warning it gave me. I thought about the $640 and the rent after that and the rent after that, and understood that none of it mattered anymore in the way it used to, because the cost of staying inside that system had stopped being measured in dollars a long time ago, and I had simply been too afraid, or too broke, or too committed to the story of myself as someone who finishes what she starts, to notice. I hit confirm on the deactivation before the delivery countdown even finished ticking down. The order didn't disappear right away. That's the detail that stayed with me the longest, honestly, for a full 10-15 seconds after I deactivated my account. The notification for 144 Halden Court sat there on my locked screen. Countdown still running, as though it hadn't yet caught up to the fact that the door it had been knocking on no longer had anyone standing behind it. Then, all at once, my screen went dark. The app logging me out automatically, severing whatever thread of access it had been using to reach me. And in the sudden dead quiet of my phone with no notifications at all, for the first time in weeks, I felt something in my chest loosen that I hadn't known was clenched. I didn't fight anything that night. No confrontation, no last stand, no dramatic severing of a monster's grip on my throat. I sat in a gas station parking lot and pressed a button on a phone. And somewhere out past the highway, I choose to believe, though I have no proof beyond my own need to believe it, that whatever had been using that account, that pattern, that specific green-buttoned architecture of obligation, found the door quietly and permanently closed to it, at least through me. Marcus called 2 minutes later. I hadn't told him what I'd done. "You still there?" he said, and something in his voice told me he already suspected. "I deactivated," I said. "Just now." A long exhale on the other end, static with relief. "Good," he said. "Good, Dani. That's good. It's not over, though, is it? Somewhere out there, some other driver's account is about to light up with the exact same order." He didn't answer that because there wasn't an answer that would have made either of us feel better. Only one that was true, and we both already knew it. I spent the next several hours doing the only thing that felt like it mattered anymore, trying to warn the people most likely to be next. I posted in the driver forum Marcus had shown me under my real account. No anonymity, because anonymity felt like exactly the kind of caution that had let this go on as long as it had. I wrote out everything as plainly as I could. The frozen GPS, the address that didn't exist on any map. Warren, the hatch, the pattern of clustered sickness following every driver who'd made that specific run. I expected to be laughed at, or ignored, or quietly banned for spreading what would look, to anyone reading fast, like unhinged conspiracy nonsense. Some of that happened, but not all of it. A driver I'd never met, screen name just a string of numbers, replied within 20 minutes. I got sent to a place called Ferris Landing last month. Same story. Thought I was losing it. Nobody would believe me either. Another reply came an hour after that, this one shorter, colder, more urgent. I have an order for Corin Hollow sitting in my queue right now. Timer's at 40 seconds. What do I do? I typed back as fast as I could, faster than I'd typed anything in my life. Decline it. Don't accept. Whatever penalty they threaten, decline it. I'll help you fight the account-standing hit, I promise. Just don't go. I don't know, to this day, whether that stranger declined in time. I never got a follow-up message. Maybe they took my word for it and let the timer run out. Maybe curiosity or desperation won out over caution the way it had for me that first night. And somewhere out there, another Warren opened another door for them. I have to live without knowing. And that not knowing has become its own permanent resident in my chest. Sitting next to the guilt about Priya. The two of them keeping each other company in the specific quiet hours when sleep won't come. That's the hope I ended up with in the end. And I want to be honest that it's a small, imperfect, unglamorous kind of hope. Nothing like the clean rescues you see in movies about outbreaks. It's not the hope that everything gets fixed, or that whatever's under those old developments gets found and sealed and neutralized by someone with the authority and resources to actually do it properly. As far as I know, nobody with that kind of authority has ever even acknowledged it exists. It's a smaller hope than that. It's the hope that somewhere, in some other gas station parking lot, another exhausted driver with rent due sees a stranger's warning flash across a forum thread 30 seconds before their own countdown hits 0 and declines and drives away, and never finds out how close they came to becoming the next set of hands the loop uses to reach further out into the world. 6 months later, I don't drive for anyone anymore. I work at a hardware store now, less money, more hours on my feet. And I've never once missed the sound of that double chime notification. Though my body still flinches sometimes at phones that make a similar sound in grocery stores and coffee shops. A small permanent scar in my nervous system that I've stopped trying to fully heal. Priya is better mostly. There are gaps in her now. Small silences where a thought used to move faster. And some days, I catch that half-second lag in her eyes before she answers a simple question. And I feel the old cold drop in my stomach before reminding myself, gently, every time, that this is just Priya now. A version of her that survived something most people never had to survive at all. And that survival doesn't always look like an unbroken line back to who you were before. Marcus still drives, because he says somebody has to be out there watching it, and I understand that, even though I couldn't keep doing it myself. We talk most weeks. Neither of us has heard the name Halden Glen mentioned by anyone official, not once, not anywhere. As though the county's old deregistration paperwork simply worked exactly as intended and erased the place a second time. This time from public memory instead of just the tax rolls. My old phone sits in a drawer, battery dead, SIM removed months ago. Sometimes, on nights I can't explain, I plug it in anyway, just to check. And there they are, waiting, stacked up in a queue that no longer belongs to me, but apparently never stopped trying. New delivery available. New delivery available. New delivery available. Addresses I don't recognize, on streets I've never heard of. In developments that I'd bet everything I have left don't show up on any satellite photo taken from any height. I don't accept them. I never will again. But I keep the phone charged, just in case. Because the only thing I know for certain now is that somewhere out there, tonight, some other driver's dashboard is about to light up with an offer that sounds, for one ordinary 60-second countdown, like just another delivery.